Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union was his greatest gamble of the Second World War.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at 10 horrible choices from human history that had disastrous and deadly consequences.
His radical policies had devastated the country and triggered the deadliest famine known to human history.
Russia invades Ukraine.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
8 years after annexing Crimea in 2014, Russia followed up with a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin expected the war to end in a matter of days or hours. Instead, as of 2024, it is still dragging on. The death toll of Russian troops is staggering. Some estimates suggest that more than 100,000 soldiers have been killed.
Many of the casualties are now older fighters with little or no training. Significant numbers have also been recruited from prisons.
The attrition rate has forced Russia to conscript new fodder for the war machine. Economically, Russia faces severe sanctions and a crippling recession. Russia has been forced to seek economic aid and military armament from China and North Korea. Western aid to Ukraine has allowed their military in 2024 to launch the first significant military incursion into Russian territory since World War II.
Video shows a Ukrainian soldier driving through the bombed-out Russian countryside unchallenged, then celebrating driving back a Russian tank.
Welcome to Ukraine.
The Wanggongchang explosion. Gunpowder has been used by China since the 9th century.
Early Chinese alchemists were trying to create a potion for immortality. Instead, what they created was a flammable powder that burned down many of their homes.
Despite centuries of use and refinement, Beijing officials were criminally negligent in the spring of 1626. It never seemed to occur to anyone in power that the center of a densely populated city wasn't the best choice for storing volatile materials. Late on the morning of May 30th, for reasons which remain unclear, the Wanggongchang armory exploded. Everything within 4 square kilometers was all but obliterated, and debris was launched across the length of the city. Somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 people were killed, and large swaths of the city were utterly destroyed. The American invasion of Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The 2003 U.S.-led invasion of Iraq was driven by the deadly combination of misleading claims and poor assumptions. The U.S. government convinced their allies that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and had links to terrorism.
There was no link between 9/11 and Iraq, so the Bush administration began manufacturing justifications.
The Bush administration's assertions were later proven false. No WMDs were ever found, nor was any evidence linking Iraq to al-Qaeda. By some estimates, the invasion led to over 1 million deaths and casualties, as well as widespread destruction and regional instability. The U.S. invasion also ultimately played a crucial role in the rise of ISIS. The economic cost to Americans is hard to pin down, though some experts believe that the war cost taxpayers between $1 and $2 trillion.
It changed the entire Middle East. In fact, it changed much of our world forever.
A mistranslation may have caused America's nuclear attacks.
The U.S. had a choice: an invasion of Japan requiring 1 million troops or a top-secret weapon. The Japanese were given an ultimatum: surrender or suffer dire consequences.
After the fall of Hitler's Germany, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration demanding Japan's unconditional surrender. The declaration came with a warning: refusal would result in, quote, prompt and utter destruction. The culture of Imperial Japan couldn't tolerate public consideration of surrender. They responded with a statement including the word mokusatsu. The Allies interpreted this as an outright rejection of the Potsdam Declaration. Mokusatsu, they believed, meant to ignore with silent contempt. They acted accordingly, dropping 2 nuclear bombs.
When we came back after the surrender, we came back to the same area, and the whole city was completely flat. It was really devastating to see.
However, some believe Foreign Minister Togo was counseling circumspection and patience. He hoped that the Soviets would mediate a better deal. In the years after the nuclear attack on Japan, people have argued that by mokusatsu, Japanese leaders just meant, quote, withholding comment.
Truman claimed he never lost a night of sleep over his decision, and to this day, the United States has never apologized for it. Still, The horror of Hiroshima and Nagasaki firmly cemented atomic bombs as the world's weapons of absolute last resort.
Moctezuma II welcomes the Spanish.
Cortez's legacy is a complex one. On one hand, he is the conqueror of Mexico. He brought and extended the Spanish Empire. But from the indigenous point of view, he was a mass murderer.
Moctezuma II, the Aztec emperor, received Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors in 1519 with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. According to some historians, Moctezuma, influenced by a prophecy suggesting that a god would return in the form of a pale-skinned man, initially saw the Spaniards as divine. Cortés, he thought, could be the incarnation of the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. He sought to appease them by offering gifts and hospitality, believing this would prevent conflict.
Cortés was motivated by these treasures and continued towards the city. He later wrote, "Moctezuma came to greet us, and with him some 200 lords, all barefoot and dressed in a different costume."
Instead, his decision invited invasion. Cortés and his men exploited Moctezuma's hospitality to gather intelligence, gain political leverage, and incite dissent among the Aztecs. The Spaniards spread disease and formed alliances with rivals to the Aztecs.
This alliance would be crucial for Cortés, as the Tlaxcalteca helped him navigate the landscape, served as translators, and urged the defeat of Moctezuma.
Combined with their superior weaponry, they easily conquered the Aztec Empire completely by 1521. The wrong turn that triggered World War I.
From a pistol shot at Sarajevo, the first of the great modern world wars exploded. And almost overnight, all of Europe was engulfed in conflict.
World War I is infamous in history as an accidental war. The assassination of one man, when combined with a series of interwoven alliances, was a string of dominoes that dragged the world into armed conflict. But did you know that Archduke Ferdinand was killed thanks to a wrong turn? The morning of the assassination, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his motorcade managed to avoid a bombing by his would-be assassins.
The bomb was thrown by Nedeljko Čebrinović, a member of the young Serbian nationalist movement. There are a few injuries, but Ferdinand and his wife are unharmed.
They continued their day until his driver accidentally made a wrong turn. He attempted to pull the car back in reverse, stalling the car. Unfortunately, he did so right in front of Gavrilo Princip, who happened to be on that wrong street at a cafe, and took advantage of the situation to shoot Ferdinand.
As the crowd tries to subdue Princip, the Archduke and his wife are left bleeding in the car,
insulting Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan's legacy today is his reputation as a great conqueror and ruthless ruler. Under him, the Mongols were able to sweep out of Central Asia and take over most of the known world.
Genghis Khan knew that diplomacy was as useful a tool as conquest. To that end, in response to the killing of a caravan of his merchants in Khwarezm, Khan sent a diplomatic mission to Shah al-Din Muhammad II of the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire. His envoys were not greeted warmly. The Shah, ruler of a vast empire, dismissed the power of the Mongols. He accused the envoys of espionage and had them executed. The Great Khan did not take this slight well. He launched a savage and devastating campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire. He systematically pulled Khwarezm apart battle by battle and city by city.
50,000 Tajik infantry poured out of the city to meet the Mongols, but resistance was futile.
The war ultimately decimated the population. As a result, the empire was brought to utter ruin by 1221.
The Shah managed to escape his Mongol pursuers only in the spring of 1221 to die a broken and defeated man on a remote island in the Caspian Sea.
Stalin's terror famine.
In terms of ruthlessness, bloodlust, Stalin remains one of the greatest villains of the 20th century.
To this day, the Holodomor is considered one of the greatest tragedies of Ukrainian history.
A term meaning death by starvation. It was genocide.
From 1932 to 1933, Joseph Stalin pushed a brutal campaign of forced collectivization and grain requisitioning in Soviet Ukraine. Unfortunately, the country was already in the middle of a food shortage, exacerbated by Stalin's policies.
Records show the Soviets took over 4 million tons of grain from Ukraine alone in 1932. That same year, a new law punished anyone who took even a handful of grain or was caught hiding grain or bread with 10 years in prison or the death penalty.
As a result, Ukraine fell into a terrible famine. By the end of 1933, somewhere between 3.5 and 5 million Ukrainians perished due to hunger and related diseases.
In the fall and winter of 1932, Soviet police began seizing not just grain, but anything edible, even livestock.
Stalin refused to provide aid, although Russia continued to export grain. The Holodomor devastated Ukrainian agriculture and local economies, ripping families to pieces and traumatizing a nation. Hitler invading Russia.
Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union was his greatest gamble of the Second World War.
One problem with narcissistic dictators is that their arrogance often prevents them from learning the lessons of history. They think themselves special, able to achieve what those in the past could not.
Despite facing a Red Army with almost 3 million men on its western border, Hitler is confident of victory.
That is one of many reasons why Adolf Hitler repeated Napoleon's classic blunder, invading Russia. In 1812, the French emperor pulled together a massive army from his conquests in Europe and sent this merry band into the frozen Russian winter. They were almost completely destroyed. In 1941, Hitler betrayed his erstwhile ally Joseph Stalin. Operation Barbarossa was a massive Nazi mobilization to the east. The Germans saw major victories in Ukraine until they reached Moscow in the winter of 1941. Their backs were broken and were forced to retreat west. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Mao's Great Leap Forward.
His radical policies had devastated the country and triggered the deadliest famine known to human history.
Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, aimed to rapidly industrialize China,
forcing workers in the countryside to farm crops on government-run communes, and millions more to manufacture crude steel in homemade blast furnaces.
Like Stalin before him, Mao embarked on a massive forced collectivization effort and large-scale agricultural and construction projects like dams. The campaign was a disaster. Mao's production targets were utterly unrealistic.
The Chinese people were being forced to work tirelessly on land they once owned themselves, and they were starting to lose morale.
Mao led his nation into the jaws of a deadly and widespread famine. The deaths caused by the Great Leap Forward are estimated to be somewhere between 15 and 55 million people. This failed effort hampered China's economy and agricultural output for decades. The impact was even felt in 1975 with the Banqiao Dam disaster. The dam, built during the Great Leap Forward, was poorly constructed and ultimately collapsed thanks to torrential rains. As many as 240,000 people died. Did we make a huge mistake and leave one of history's deadliest blunders off our list? Let us know in the comments below.
The First World War has begun, and all because of a wrong turn.
you